Buenos días, buenos días. Welcome to Cafecito Tempranito con Tayrin this morning. And in celebration of Women's History Month, we have the president of the Hispanic Women's League, Maria Cruz, with us today. And thank you. Welcome to Cafecito Tempranito, Maria.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you on board. And today we're going to speak on basically Afro-Latina. What does that mean for us? Being Latina enough. What does that mean? And what does Women's History Month mean to us as well, right? Like just all this connected. They celebrate you as the beautiful person that you are. You have been in my life for many years. We have met in the most probably weirdest way, but we won't go into that story. Um, most unorthodox way, but we are here, and the
Here
point
we
is
are.
that the whole point that I think it was always meant for us to meet, not the other individuals that were in between.
Oh my God.
Because you literally lived right around the corner from my
Literally
mom's
around the
house,
corner.
which
Yes.
was where I was staying. So it was crazy how that was. But the fact that we made that connection, that we were able to connect on a whole different level, and that we have seen the evolution of both of our journeys, since then, really seen that journey. Um, and really have been there for each other in many different ways and many different capacities. And like I told you this morning, thank you for always being consistent in your commitment and in anything that you put your mind onto. So
Thank you
cheers
for
to
that, Tayrin.
you,
Very kind.
and for Women's History Month, for the badassery of a woman that you are.
Thank you.
Um, and please tell me first, or let our listeners hear out, what is it that you do other than being the president of Hispanic Women's League? What else do you do?
Well, Tyrene, very kind words. I return them all to you. I think Buffalo is filled with a lot of powerful, powerful women, just powerful individuals as a whole in every capacity. Other than the president of the Hispanic Women's League, I consider myself an advocate, an activist. In my real time work, without mentioning my organization, I work in the equity, inclusion, diversity, and belonging space. I know that is a space that's heavily attacked right now. So I do a lot of things around equity, not so much equality, but equity, and
Mm.
making sure that people are getting provided the proper resources in every space, from my home to the community to my job to my life, that people have the resources to be able to achieve higher goals. So I'm all about advocating for the women, specifically the Latina woman, but all around all women. Extremely passionate about helping each other. Mm, there's some things down the line. I'm looking to start a podcast. We have it currently call it as That's It Sis, and it would be with my sister. So we both have extremely hectic lives, so we're waiting for the right moment. And I think at this point, it's not going to be the right moment. We're just going to put it out there.
Yeah,
So
and
pretty much, yeah.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait to hear that podcast, because I know that both of you have such amazing topics to have a conversation about, to touch on, and it's needed. We need to hear those topics of conversation. I feel like as Latinas, or as women, period, for so long, our voices were minimized. For so long, we were told not to speak up about things. And in the last few years, definitely the woman's voice has been amplified, and we're being empowered to do so. And you're going to have certain individuals who will still try to minimize that, including women trying to
Mm-hmm.
minimize us and trying to tell us not to say anything. So it's important that we are all speaking our truth, and that we are all speaking from our own perspectives, and for everybody to understand too that it's our perspective, right? Like, don't take it as a literal things. Sometimes certain things are taken out of context, is our own opinion, our own advice, based off our own experiences, and then the education that we have received. So I think it's important to amplify that. And thank you for the space that you're in, at the organization that you're at, because it's needed there and in our community. I feel like when everything happened with George Floyd, there was all this about diversity and inclusion, and these positions that were created. given to certain individuals. But I feel like the Latino community was really forgotten about. And I think that's where the Afro-Latina for me comes in, is that being in we are people that are we are brown. We are not Hispanics. We come from all different types of areas, from Spain, from Mexico, from Africa. We're all combined, is what is sort of what was I like a mutt. we're
Yes.
we're combined with all of that. So to exclude us from those positions or from those conversations is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
We are needed. We should also be a part of those conversations. So speaking on that, one of the questions I did have for you is, what does it mean for you personally to identify as an Afro-Latina?
Great question, Tyrene. I think for me, so I've gone through a little bit of journey because, as we become more educated, for me, it's been like more the reading, the experiences, and the spaces that I walk in. I've always identified, firstly, I used to identify as Hispanic. And then I really, really learned the history behind that, and I wanted to get closer to my own identity, as we all look to identify who we really are. And unfortunately, our color and our background plays a whole role in who we are and who we become. So Afro-Latina for me means that I'm embracing both the Black and my Native um, roots of what makes me and what
Mm-hmm.
makes Puerto Ricans. As of recently, I've really, really honed in on just simply saying I'm a Puerto Rican woman,
Mm.
or I'm a woman from Puerto Rico. Whichever one, both simultaneously have sit in the same space for me, being a woman and being a Puerto Rican woman. So Afro Latina is just embracing. I did my ancestry DNA, and my Taino part is 21%, and my African side is 46%. So, and then the rest is just a bunch of scatter, from Spain and
Mm-hmm.
different areas. Because as we know, this is how we came to be. We were spread
Mm-hmm.
across, and then our history is not fully recognized or fully told. But a lot of the other groups have had the same experience. It's just other groups have had uh, to be able to leverage the history within the United States to be able to put the history forth. For us, people don't even recognize that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
things that people don't like. Do you need a passport? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
a green card? Are you an immigrant? As a matter of fact, I was just in a in a house first home buyers class, and the teacher was talking about how the programs that the certificate that you would get could be used in Puerto Rico. And someone said, well, how come we could use it in Puerto Rico and not in Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
And the instructor said, at one point, Mexico was part of the US, but that's a whole nother story. But Puerto Rico is still, we're still citizens of the we're American. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another level of identity to identify with. But I identify as a Puerto Rican American woman, and Afro Latina, just embracing again my Taino and my African side.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think it's important for people to understand that what Afro-Latina means is a woman or girl mixed with African and Latin American origin or descent. Right. And so from Puerto Rico, those are where, and we're Puerto Rican, and that's the only reason why I'm saying Puerto Rico, is that Puerto Rico was made up of that, of the different cultures with the African and American individuals that came in, and Tainos and Indian, and we were all mixed into that. And so, and it's evident in our music, is
Our beats.
evident in our the way we look. We are mixed, and Puerto Ricans or Hispanics, period, we come in all different colors. Like there's no way to say you're not Hispanic to somebody just based off the way they look. I have a cousin who is very fair skinned with blue eyes. You would have never thought, looks like Barbara Streisand. And you would never think that she was his Puerto Rican. But once she
That's
starts
us.
talking, you're like, oh, damn.
That's
Catches you
us.
completely off guard. But that's how it is. You go to Puerto Rico and everybody looks like here in the United States, all mixed except everybody's Puerto Rican.
And that's
Um,
and you hit on a point in time when you go to Puerto Rico. when you're in the island of Puerto Rico, you're not filling out a blank that says black, white. We're not doing that. So when we come to the mainland, is when those identities start coming in, and you start like questioning, like, wait, what? I'm Puerto Rican. In the winters I look extra light. In the summers I look extra darker. When my hair is long, I have curls. When I have a slick back, I could pass
Mm-hmm.
as anything else, Italian, whatever you want. And that's where I
Mm-hmm.
know some of my privilege lies, in my ability to pass a certain other places. But nonetheless, the idea of Afro-Latina is not because my skin color is black. How many people have the ignorance of thinking that that's what there's black people that are fully 100% black, and they could be as light as me. That's just
Mm-hmm.
DNA. It doesn't have anything. Nonetheless, you're still a black person, brown person, and that's the black and brown. I know we're gonna get into some of that, but that's a whole nother category of how we get identified: black, brown. If we're gonna create events just for brown, if we're gonna create just events for black, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Really? What
Mm-hmm.
does it mean?
Yeah, exactly. And speaking on that, so now that we're touching on that topic, that was something that came up recently for me. I was in conversation with somebody about a different company or organization that was doing something that stated that this was specifically for Black and Brown. And when I confronted the person about, hey, as Hispanics, is this something that we can be a part of, so forth? And this person came out saying, well, it's specifically for the African American community, for Black, even though their sites had said about Black and Brown. So when asking a friend, that African American friend mentioned to me that there's some African Americans that do not consider a person who is brown to be Hispanic. And I was just like, wait, what? A person of color who is brown to me means it's Hispanics, it's Asians, it's any person of color, right? That identifies outside of the Caucasian, or multiracial, how a lot of these applications are starting to change and starting to put multiracial, because at the end of the day, as Puerto Ricans, we're multiracial. We're not just one race.
Absolutely.
So tell me, talk to me about that, about your advice or your opinions on that.
Well, Tyrene, it's interesting you said that you had someone tell you, in a sense that you weren't black enough to be a part of something. For me, it's been an experience. When I tell people, when I identify as Afro-Latina, I get a lot of pushback from Hispanic men, Latino men,
Mm,
and a lot of pushback from Black women. You're not black. What are you doing? That's
same.
not.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how are you going to tell me who I am, what I am, and what I identify with? My struggles as a Black, brown are the same as an underserved class. And I don't like using the word underserved, but the reality is that when me, and I also don't, there's Black people who don't like to be identified as African American, but when I walk in with my Black friend that people optically look and say Black and look at me, when we walk into a place full of Caucasians, no one's going to differentiate the two of us. It's going to be, oh, look at those people of color. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be when I'm looking the way when I'm looking at a perspective from a white person. They're not looking at me and thinking, oh, I'm welcome you more than I'm gonna welcome her. I mean, my kids are very, very light skinned, and my
Mm-hmm.
daughter has struggled a lot with when she wants to amplify the voices of the Latina woman,
Mm,
and when she wants to go on social media or when she wants to speak on a topic, she struggles a lot because she's like, do I really have the right to speak on it? Because optically speaking, although I know
mm.
there's struggles that my mom has faced and the struggles that we have faced in different areas that we've lived in Buffalo, are people going to look at me and think she's a white woman because she has very light hair? Naturally,
Mm,
her skin is very light, her eyes are of color. So I've been in a household where I've seen, my son has the curly afro hair, with the, big lips and a lot of traits that identify him as our Afro-Latina portion. So in my own household, we have three different segues. So, but nonetheless, when I walk into a space, my family is a family of color. My concerns
mm-hmm.
when my son drives his vehicle are the same as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
who has a Black child. My concerns of, is my son going to get pulled over when he's hanging out with his friends? He's the only kid of color.
Yeah.
he's going to be the target no matter what. When I walk into spaces, I am a Black person. They're not looking at me as look at that brown person.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess when we start moving into like, a lot of the other underserved communities, I think that's where a lot of the breakdown and confusion happens. Recently I've been listening to a lot of books, and I've noticed that they start strictly in the beginning of the book, start talking, about the Black community. And as they get towards the end of the books, they start bringing in the Latino community because,
Mm-hmm.
as you're writing, it could take you a year or 2 years. So your knowledge and awareness of what are the groups affected by the conversation that you're having becomes more clear. So that's what I've experienced. I'm like, okay, so now they're adding the Latinos, and that means that there was a moment in their writing this book that they recognize that this is an impact, what the Black community and the Latino community, we walk into spaces and, unfortunately, I do feel that the Black community is more educated on their history than our Latino community. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where the struggle and the pushback comes, the lack of education on each other's history, which
Yes,
is very,
correct.
very similar.
Yes, yes, definitely is the lack of education, the ignorance to it, and not acknowledging that places like Puerto Rico and other places that they African Americans descended to those areas, when they couldn't come to the United States and so forth. And that's why we're made up, and that's why we identify as Afro-Latina, or Afro-Latinos, because we came from all of that. We understood the music, we understood the food, so much of it all stems from all different cultures, all combined. And it's great that they're finally starting to add us. It sucks that we were an afterthought, but I guess better late than never. Is making sure that we're also speaking up for ourselves. I think in the Latino community, and especially in the smaller communities, you will have this fight against each other where you're kind of like, they feel like competing, and it shouldn't be that way. We have to really advocate for ourselves, because if we have all these other cultures doing it for themselves, where they're advocating and they're uplifting each other up, we have to be able to do the same. We have to be able to get our egos and prides out of the way and say, no, we can uplift this individual as well. And
Yes,
yeah, maybe they'll go farther than we are, and that's okay. That's where their journey has to take them, right? Maybe my journey is just me literally just doing this, but meeting all these individuals that I'm interviewing, and being able to be a part of that, and be able to hear their stories, and be able to say, wow, one day I interviewed that person and look where they're at now, and be able, and I got to see where they were in that moment. So just uplifting each other up. And because if others are not doing it for us, and if we're not doing it for ourselves first, then who else is going to do it? I have
absolutely.
found many other cultures or races that support us before our own kind, and that's sad. That's really sad that we have that. um so we really need to change that, and I know that little by little we're starting to change it. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think the point for you and I is to be able to leave that legacy, to be able to leave that, and hopefully see the change within our time. But if we don't get to see that change within our time, that we're able to leave that legacy for our other generations to change that going forward.
Absolutely, Tyrene. Like that's important that you said, just creating spaces
Hmm.
where we could be authentically ourselves. I mean, that's what I feel like you're creating. I mean, I've watched all your episodes since you started this
My number one
series,
fan.
or I'm thinking this is your third series. You started in January, right? And you're entering
Yep.
your third series.
Yep.
Yeah, so like your third series, and I've seen the many diverse people that you brought. Even though we're all Latinos, we all have some different aspect of our Latinidad represented in your show. And that's the beauty of if we all came together and worked together, the amount of things that we could accomplish if we move past the
Mhm.
colorism and who has had the biggest struggle and who can advocate more, and why are we creating spaces just for Latinos and just for Black communities and just for the
Mhm.
Asian and just for the, why those places are important. They're
Mhm.
important because that's where we come as authentically as we can, and allows us to step into other spaces as
Mhm.
authentically as we can. So I thank you for the space that you're creating for all of us to have this authentic conversations and educate our communities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, it makes me think about, and I think people don't look at it this way. At the end of the day, when we die, all is left is our skeletons. We're all literally skeletons underneath the color, underneath the features. We're all look the same. We're all literally skeletons, and our skeletons may have some dents here and there. They're different from others, but it's a skeleton. That's
Mhm.
all it is. The outside is just whatever the outside is. For whatever reason, that's what we look like on the outside. But on the inside, we all look the same.
Mhm.
So sometimes, I mean, granted, I don't wish we were all walking around looking like skeletons, but sometimes I wish that that was the case, that we
Halloween all
all
year
look the
round.
same, to see
Halloween
what
all
we,
year round.
yeah. So to see what are we gonna do? How are you gonna differentiate anybody from anybody else? You wouldn't treat anybody differently because they look the same, right?
That's
You're gonna be like, oh,
absolutely.
well, he looked the same, you know, but it probably would be boring because he
Yes.
looked the same.
Yes.
So embracing that, embracing the difference, but at the same time, without feeling like we need to minimize anybody or put anybody down, or feel like we're better than anybody else because of that. And speaking on that, is there at any point, was there any moment, whether at work or personal, where you walked into a room and you felt like you felt as a Latina, felt invisible or unheard?
Oh my God, Tyrene, that's such a layered question. Because I don't hear it, but I'm told, that I have a tiny bit of an accent. You know, as I was growing up as a young child, I didn't pay attention to any of that. Really, when I entered spaces of concerns was when I started going to high school. I went to a private all female school, and it wasn't many of us. And I remember going to those spaces and people looking at me like not only not feeling invisible, but looking like I was like this shiny object that just walked into this space. And they needed to figure out like what is she smart? What is she here? But
Hmm.
I've definitely walked into a lot of spaces where being Latina walks in first, women second, and then me, the person, third, not because of my choice, but because others made it a choice, but
Hmm.
yet still made me being Latina invisible. Um, and the opposite effect where I was grouped as just a group of color and ignored as they would ignore every other group and not seeing the human in me. Absolutely, restaurants. Even when you think that you're like the center, it's just completely ignored. Like I've been sitting at the table ordering food with other people, completely overlooked.
Hmm.
And they go to the next person, my coworker, whomever, and I'm like, did no one see me sitting here? Like, did I
Hmm.
not part of this conversation? And it's happened a lot, in a lot of spaces, in meetings where I walked in and maybe I said something and then it could have been the same exact person that my white counterpart said. And what they said had more value.
Hmm.
And I'm like, they literally said the same exact thing I just said. So where's what did I miss? So yeah, it's very frustrating. And even at this point, as far as advanced as I've come in my career and in my personal life and in my own journey, I still walk into spaces and I have internalized that I have to speak a little bit louder, that I have
Hmm.
to wear something bolder, that I have to be outside of my own skin, to be and to be labeled as aggressive or aggressive. I say aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Aggressive, loud. No, I've had to internalize those traits. But recently I've just learned that I just kind of got to sit down a little bit more and listen. And some wise people have told me in the listening you hear more.
Mm,
So then when I come around, I come with more power. But
mm,
nonetheless, it really is frustrating. It shouldn't be like that. Where aside from being a woman, being a Latina woman, we have so many layers to us that affect how we're received or perceived in spaces. But feeling ignored is often happens, especially when I'm with my white counterparts, heavily,
hmm.
heavily invisible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that two things that you touched on there is, the first is feeling like, okay, you're not seen, right? and you're in this group, you're in this meeting, and nobody's realizing that you're there, or they do, but they don't want to acknowledge it.
I think you're the secretary taking notes.
Yes. You think you're the secretary, you think you're the assistant, you think you're just somebody who's just in a lower position. And but the moment you say something in a louder voice or in a way where they perceive as aggressive, or let's be real, they think you're coming off as a bitch. Because that's how they'll perceive it. Even though if a man says the same exact thing, same exact way, they don't perceive him as an asshole. They just perceive him as a boss and as just being assertive. But when the female, because this is not just about Latina, but even just as a female, we're perceived as a bitch, or that we're being when it comes to our color, that we're being aggressive, that we're being that person that is just trying to be loud and trying to make a statement, and we can't just say it in a way where it's more calmly. No, we did try to say it when we were more calmly and you weren't listening.
Nope. And even when I was saying it a little bit more stronger, I'm still not my emotion didn't move into an angry space. It moved into I'm here, see me, I'm still trying to share this, listen to what I have to say. It's not me changing my emotion. And that's the perception that people think that I'm moving from being, oh, she was so nice and so calm. And what happened? Because, my transition over the past 5 years, that's what's happened. I've gone from being very like go with the flow, very meek, very like, oh, as long as it's not affecting me directly. Like, I mean, that's been my journey for the last 7 years, not 5, last 7 years. So now when I walk into spaces, I'm more like, and I think it's also a defense mechanism where I'm like, I have to walk in here and immediately like I have to say hi to everybody.
You have your guard up already.
I don't have the same privilege as, my white counterparts or male that walk into a room. So just walk in, sit down, and expect that I'm going to demand the attention, especially when I'm leading the meetings. Often I don't sit at the head of the table. I sit in between everyone because I see myself as an equal. So immediately it's like, who's leading this meeting? And who? Oh, I'm like, right here. So I feel the need that I have to constantly introduce myself, and you have to lead with all the things, your titles and what you're doing. And it's such an uncomfortable space to be in, to have to lead with everything else and not just be me. I could never just be me, Maria, the smart, consistent, patient, loving. I have to be this wall.
You can't be what they call it now, the soft era of the woman. They're calling it that, and I love that, right? Like being able to be a boss individual, badass individual, woman leader, but be able to also be soft and be able to show our soft side. And that's a whole nother conversation. But another thing that you touched on was not being heard in that same space. The same thing you just said, nobody heard it. But the moment a male counterpart says the same thing, whatever race that male is, all of a sudden they heard everything that person said. And I experienced that.
Idea.
Yeah. And I experienced that in a different job that I was at, where I felt literally every single time I would say something, I was not heard at all. But the moment a male counterpart said the same thing or backed up whatever I said and said, hey, yeah, Tayrin is right, blah, 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 all of a sudden it's like they're paying attention to what was said. And I got to the point where I didn't want to say anything anymore during the meetings. I would just stay quiet. And so then it was it was brought to my attention, like, oh, you're never saying nothing through the meetings, blah, 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 blah. And I said, for what? What am I saying something in a meeting for? Nobody's listening to what I'm saying. I've literally said XYZ plenty of times. Nobody has done anything about it. The moment this specific person says the same thing I said or backs me up, that's the only time you guys listen. So I got to the point where I felt voiceless. And because I felt voiceless, I became like depressed within that company. I kind of just felt like I wasn't heard, I wasn't seen. Especially me coming from, I started my own non-for-profit in 2012, raising awareness. Like I've been an entrepreneur. Thank you. I've been in leadership positions, or in positions where I was always trying to make a change. And to then go to a place where they weren't even giving me that opportunity. Any idea that I would give was another thing. Any idea that I would give was shot down immediately.
Mhm.
And I just became very unhappy. And it was evident. The turning point for me was last year when, well, it was two turning points, but one turning point for me last year was when I realized that it had taken such a toll on me. I didn't want to go to work. I
Mm.
did not want to go to work. And I was so pissed and aggravated in the morning that I like physically did not want to go to work. I did not want to go there mentally. And I ended up snapping on my kids in a way that I had never snapped before. And it was over something minimal that they didn't do something. But because of that one little something, I snapped and flipped out in the morning, which nobody wants to wake up like that with your
Yeah.
parent, flipping out on you. And I flipped out. I mean, I even hit a wall. Like it was bad. But then I
Mhm.
realized it was because I was sacrificing my happiness to
Your
go to
health.
the place. Yes, my health, my happiness, my sacrificing so much just to go there, just to bring the money in, to come in, to pay for the bills. And then just for little things like that to not be done on their behalf. But it wasn't fair to them for me to snap on them because it wasn't their fault that I was working at a place that I was unhappy with. And so that's when I began to like manifest and say, no, I need to change this. This is what I want. This is what I need. And saying it over and over again. And then for me, I feel like God put some things in place, some
Amen.
things happened, and it forced me to just make the decision to step down.
God is awesome.
it
Perfect.
was it was now in that moment it didn't feel like
It
I feel like
never does.
I
It's
was
discomfort,
like,
Tyrone. Discomfort
what
is
are we
growth.
I was like, what are we doing? I was like, this is happening. I was like, I have to make this decision. I have to step down. I have no choice. um it felt like the scariest thing in the world. I knew I had to step out on a leap of faith. Literally, it was a complete leap of faith. I had no idea how I was going to do it financially because it would have been a huge reduction of pay. And I said, it's gonna work out. It's just gonna work out. It was all of a sudden like this sense of peace came over me
Mm.
and said, it's gonna work out. Trust the process. And even though I cried for like a week and a half, knowing that I was making this change, not knowing what was gonna happen, um, no, like just being like, oh my God, I really am walking out in faith on this because I have no idea how I'm going to pay these bills come 2 months from now. Because right now I may be okay, but 2 months from now, when that really hits, it's going to change the trajectory of that. And when I did it, oh my God, it felt was such a huge relief. And then it was crazy because within that month time, people didn't know that I had stepped down from like other places. Like at my job, they knew, but at other
Mm-hmm.
places, people that were my friends had no clue that I had stepped down from this position or anything like that. People from New York City, um, out like that live in other places here in Buffalo were contacting me every single week. I had a different person contact me with a different job opportunity that they thought I would be great for or that somebody I may know would be great for.
Wow.
It
Look at that.
literally
Look at
happened
God.
every single week. And I was like, what is going on? I'm
Look
like,
at God.
and all different people. Like I was just like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Until all of a sudden one position came up and it came and I'm so happy. And the difference now that I actually feel heard and seen at my current job. And
Yes.
these are males, mostly males that are there, one female when it comes to leadership, the upper management, but they actually want my opinion. They're like, Tayrin, what do you think? What do you think we should implement? What blah blah blah? And they were like, and I say something, and they're like, I like that. Let's go with that. The fact that I actually feel heard and seen feels so good.
The
And
power of feeling heard and seen, Tyrone, the power that it does for a human to
mm,
simply be seen and heard,
mm,
the amount of weight that's released, the amount of stress that's released, the amount of peace, and just the fact that we get so surprised and we feel like this, it shouldn't be like that because I should be
mm,
able to walk into every space and know that my voice is of value, but the power of just feeling seen and heard.
Absolutely. And I think other
Wow.
companies and organizations or community leaders need to take in on that, right? Whoever's listening, is that even if somebody has an idea and maybe the idea isn't perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but at least acknowledging that idea and saying this is a great idea. However, maybe let's change these little things in that within that idea, or add these certain things within that idea. But then that person feels heard and seen because they're like, oh, they took my idea, and maybe they didn't take the full idea, but at least it inspired something to
Yes.
shift.
And steps
Um,
forward to that, Tyrene, is if someone gives an idea and you acknowledge it, maybe the idea was not the way that it was verbalized or the way that you could envision it wasn't, but allow the person, create the space for this person to develop it. Create
mhm,
this space to say, okay, we're not using it right now, but you have the free of reign to go ahead and develop that idea and coming back and reintroduce it to us, not completely shutting it down, not
mhm,
completely reformatting it. Allow the person give them the resources and the tools to be able to develop further. Maybe the idea
mhm.
wasn't complete. So I think to take steps further, employers need to not only acknowledge, but create the spaces and provide the resources. And I know that that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely, especially for us women, and women of color and Latina, specifically Puerto Rican, it does matter to feel seen and heard and have our ideas um explored.
Yeah,
Explored.
absolutely. And I know we're getting down to the end of our segment here, but just wanted to touch on being Latina enough. If you could share any personal experiences that made you reflect on your own sense of being Latina enough or being Afro-Latina.
So Tyron, for me, Latina is just who I am. It's not like a lot of people think that Latina has a lot of stereotypes. Oh, if I wear my gold hoops, or if I wear my
Mm-hmm.
red lipstick, if I'm dressed a certain way, I don't buy into any of those stereotypes. I'm Latina because I'm Latina. I was born a Latina woman. I'm Latina because that's what runs through my blood is the culture, the foods, is how I relate to my family, is how I relate to the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just my language. It's not just me having the ability to speak Spanish or me being born in the island of Puerto Rico and relocating here. Being Latina for me is just in my DNA. And I feel like I want to put out message out to Latina women and men who may have been born in the mainland here in the US, who may not speak Spanish, fluently, who may not have been raised with the traditional cultures of you're still Latino. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing less than for you. There's now the way that I exclude you from being Latino is if you go out here and you completely um make the Latino in you be powerless and means
Mm-hmm.
nothing to you, then in that sense, then that's, but anytime you show up and you represent yourself as who you are, and you're Latino, that's Latino. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever walked anywhere and being told I'm not Latina enough, but I also do speak the language, and I also physically, I know that I appear to be a Latina woman. So that has not been a struggle, but it has been a struggle for my daughter. It has been a
Mm-hmm.
struggle for other women that I work with and in their spaces where they're questioning, where do I belong? I'm not, I don't speak Spanish. I'm not Latina enough for this space. I'm not Black enough for this space. Where who I identify with. Because obviously the Caucasian part, if their skin looks white, like my daughter does not identify with anything of the Caucasian culture, but she
Mm-hmm.
physically has the privilege of walking into spaces and benefiting from everything. I tell you, you're Latina, Naila. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad and I are Puerto Rican. Yes, you were
Mm-hmm.
born here in Sisters Hospital. Yes, you understand all of Spanish. And yes, you struggle to speak the Spanish because you've internalized your own stigma around that and how people are going to perceive you. That's a whole nother topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but absolutely, we need to stop the narrative. We need to stop the
Mm-hmm.
narrative of who's Latino enough. Like my nephews are black and Puerto Rican. They're Black and Puerto Rican to me. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing. That's who they are. There's nothing less
Mm-hmm.
than. There's nothing. The half of them and the other are no. You are
Yeah.
you. You're Black and Puerto Rican men. You're Black and Puerto Rican men. Regardless, there's no whether they speak the language or not. For me, you're Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
Along with your Black, you have just more of your Black side too.
Yep. Yep, I agree with that. And speaking on that, because I did want to talk about, so there was a situation, and I came out with this shirt, I think it was a year or two ago. Jesus, was it 2 years ago already? No, I think it was last year, the beginning of last year, that said educated, bilingual, Latina.
Mm-hmm.
And then under it, it said triple threat. The reason why I came out with that, it was because a few years ago, I was actually, at one point in my life, I did a little bit of Uber and Lyft driving. And I remember driving this Hispanic girl who was in college, and I was driving her home, and we got into the conversation about her applying for something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she was applying for something. I don't remember, it was a job, and I was just trying to empower her in that position and in applying for that and going for it because she wasn't feeling confident about moving into that space because she was Latina. And I remember telling her exactly that. You are educated.
Mm-mm.
You are a Latina that is bilingual. You speak both languages. I was like, that's a triple threat alone to compare to the other individuals that may interview to the same position. But us being bilingual alone is a threat, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
an advantage, is an opportunity because other individuals may only speak English, and that company may need somebody who speaks both languages because it is an advantage for them. It's an asset. Um, it's like, so don't ever feel as though just because maybe that other person may have more education, but they only speak English, that they will get the opportunity because you have, I said, walk confidently in that. And even though I told her that and I created the shirt, I wore the shirt one day last year and I went to the supermarket. And as I went into the supermarket, I found myself for some reason feeling like I needed to cover that up, feeling the need to, because, we are at a time in our lives again where there's been a lot of backlash with people of color and so forth. And I was predominantly walking into a supermarket that's predominantly white individuals who are in there. And I just found myself like trying to cover it up for some reason, not letting them see that I was Latina, that I didn't want anybody to feel a certain type of way. Or I was thinking about them, how they felt, instead of just walking confidently with my shirt, like, yeah, I'm Latina, I am educated, I am bilingual. And it is a triple threat to many, but it's not, the triple threat part is not to offend anybody. It's not to make anybody feel any type of way. It's just that that's my empowerment for me, and
Mm-hmm.
my empowerment for other individuals to feel confidently in where they're walking into. So the fact that I felt the need to want to hide that was an issue that I had to then talk to myself about and be like, why did I feel that way? Why would I need to feel the need to hide that? We shouldn't feel the need to hide our Latino-ness. Um,
Tayrin, when I hear your story, obviously I wasn't there with you and I don't know what your personal experience was, but I know sometimes and oftentimes happens to me that it's not the Latina part that I'm hiding, is the exaltation of it, of elevating me in that
mm,
space as I'm beyond what you see. I'm beyond
mm,
so intelligent, speak two languages. You're
mhm,
exalting yourself and you're not used. So you feel like you have to dim yourself
mm,
to be able to
yep,
walk into the spaces so that you're welcome without nobody looking at you. And like, who does she think she is? Like, does she know where she's walking into? So we have internalized dimming our own light and how highly we celebrate ourselves and our powers to appease and make it comfortable for others. Because obviously they could look at you, they know you're a person of color.
mhm,
So I don't believe it was your Latinidad that you were hiding. It was you're dimming your light to be able to fit into that space so
mm,
that you wouldn't be further judged aside from the optics. I mean,
yeah,
that's, you
yeah,
know, my perception because it's happened to me. It's
yeah,
happened to me where I'm being celebrated and I sit lower and lower and you were celebrating yourself with your shirt. It's your
mhm,
organization. You've created it. You built it. You created this shirt to elevate other women and yourself because that's how you see the power in us. So I mean, kudos to you for even having that shirt that impacted so many conversations. And in every space that you walk in, one thing you've taught me Never dim your light. Never
Yeah.
dim your light for others to make you feel welcome. Those who love you and the spaces that you belong into, you will be of value and welcome. Any other space that doesn't see that or values that, they don't need you.
Correct. And I
You're the
love
one who's
it.
bringing the
Thank you.
table.
Thank you. I was about to say the same thing. And in those spaces that you feel unheard or unseen, or that you feel like it's never going to change, you have the power to bring your own table and create your own space. I've told people for years now, especially here in Buffalo, New York, you'll have a lot of individuals who want to complain about things about, oh, we don't have this and we don't have that and so forth. Perfect example is, I heard that a male individual did not want to support what I was doing because they felt that, and this is a Latino man who did not want to support me or Latinas evolving because it was just for Latinas. And I'm like, make it make sense. Make the math make sense in this
Just pick on me.
situation. I'm like, okay, but that's a whole nother conversation. And I'm like, okay, so if you as a Latino man feel like I'm only supporting Latinas in this situation, why is it that you as a Latino man has not created something for Latinos? If you feel that Latino men need the support the way I'm giving it to our Latina women.
And you hit another. You said this in the beginning, Tayrin, that the people who support us the less are our own very own.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the big struggle that we've gone through in our journey. Latinas are still the largest underpaid group, like of all women.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because our own Latino men have also impeded our voices. And when we speak louder or when we advocate for ourselves, we get shut down because how dare you create that space for yourself? How dare you think that you could walk fearlessly into all these spaces? It's our very own Latino men who shut us down and keep us, or try to keep our voices. So you created something for Latina women. Latina women need it. You're helping women entrepreneurs. You're helping our community, and never once have you ever not involved men. You've welcomed them. I mean, you just had a podcast on relationships.
Yes.
Strictly, I mean, not a podcast. You just had a conversation with 3 men of color. I believe all 3 were Latino men.
Yeah, all 3 were Latino men. Yeah.
And they have so much information to give out. Like, I found it extremely useful for myself to understand, my own relationships and navigate. I'm like, wow, it was great to see that perspective. So if we have more conversations together to uplift and empower each other rather than compete, well, how dare you? And there's no space for me. Come on, make the space.
Correct.
Because the more I build my space as a Latina woman, the more I'm making space for you too. It's not just for the Latina woman. I'm creating a space for you too, for you as well. This is for all of us.
Yeah. And not for nothing, when a Latina woman is happy and feels empowered and inspired, and that's your wife or that's your girlfriend, that means your household is going to be happy and empowered and inspired and moving forward. We need to make sure we're uplifting our women. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do now, making sure that I'm incorporating the men who are in support of our Latina women into our conversations, and making sure that they also have that voice to speak on that. It shouldn't take a Latina woman to be the one to create something for Latino men. I believe it should be a Latino man if it's needed. However, I have no problem having those conversations and let's saying, let's have these conversations. Let's have different perspectives. And it's important for us to listen to those perspectives. Like you said, when I listened, even when I went back and listened to that recording, when I was talking to the men, I learned even more listening to the second time around, because sometimes when you're just talking, you're listening to a certain degree, but when you were listening to afterwards, listening to their perspectives, it helped me, even as a single woman, hearing their perspectives on how they see things. I was like, wow. I was like, I would have never thought about it that way. But that's why we need to have those conversations so that we can
Very
also
valuable.
understand. Yes,
Very
we can also
valuable. So I
understand
don't think you're excluding anyone. You just have a focus group that you understand needs it, and you're hoping that all of us help, because as you're lifting, we're all lifting.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. So I hope you didn't let that discourage you.
No. If anything, it gave me more of a push to then say, okay, let's have these other conversations.
Right.
But we're at the end of our segment. Thank you so much, Maria, for joining us today at Cafecito Tempranito con Tayrin. And for our listeners, please make sure you're listening out to all the future segments that are coming up on this series for Women's History Month. And Maria, if for some reason anybody wants to get a hold of you or get a hold of Hispanic Women's League, can you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Well, if you want to get a hold of the Hispanic Women Leagues, if you want to go straight through me, Maria Cruz at Maria Cruz 1126 at gmail.com. I will definitely forward everything over to the league's email. I don't want to say the league's email because it's so long. It's like
Yeah.
contact at HispanicWomensLeague.org. But everything you send through me right now will get redirected. I'm welcome to become members. I welcome people to check our Instagram pages, our Facebook. We have some events coming up. We have a campaign running right now on our social medias. Please check it out. Every money that comes in comes for our scholarships. Our big dinner that's happening October 11th, I believe.
Mhm.
I hope I'm not giving the wrong dates. At Rich Products, I'm horrible with dates, but we have a book club coming up. We have our financial series that just kicked off last Thursday. Very successful. We did it on budgeting. We have some more series coming up. So please go ahead and check out our websites and get to see all the things that we're doing and all the community events that we're supporting as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure to include all that into the caption once everything comes out. And again, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Have a great day.
Thank you.